Hello, my name is Maguire. I'm a senior counsel practicing at the Law Library in Dublin, and in 2010 myself and another barrister, Vincent Martin, founded New Beginning. Initially we founded New Beginning with a view to providing representation to people facing repossession of their family homes. And as we began that process, we began to realise the enormity of the over-indebtedness problem facing all sorts of Irish people the length and breadth of the country. And since that time, New Beginning has become a much bigger organisation and provides a whole range of services. But most importantly, in dealing with debt, we have to understand the new system of personal insolvency. And in order to understand personal insolvency best, we must first understand bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy has a very bad name in Ireland, and the reason it has a bad name in Ireland is that people under the old system, when they went into bankruptcy, never came out. In fact, George Lee on RTE did a programme not that long ago where he discovered that the average time for a debtor in bankruptcy in Ireland was 32 years. In the UK, for example, there's automatic discharge from bankruptcy in 1 year. So I want to explain to you over the next little while how bankruptcy will work in Ireland going forward. And it's very important that people understand how it works, because only then will they understand the options that are available to them. Surprisingly, you'll begin to realise that bankruptcy is not all that bad, and apart from the stigma attached to it, which will pass very quickly, bankruptcy is the friend of the borrower, and for tens of thousands of Irish people, potentially the release from unmanageable debt. Well, bankruptcy is an insolvency system where the High Court adjudicates a person bankrupt, and in the moment of that adjudication, the person's assets and all their debts transfer to an official called the official assignee. That's a civil servant. So from the moment of your adjudication as a bankrupt, you have no assets and you have no debts. The bankruptcy period lasts for 3 years at a maximum. In fact, it can be less than that. But during that period, the official assignee attempts to realise your estate. So all the assets you have, he sells if he can and disperses that amongst the creditors. And on the expiry of 3 years, you're discharged from bankruptcy, debt-free. Well, the old system was that creditors typically bankrupt debtors. So in other words, if you owed somebody money, you faced them applying to the High Court to bankrupt you. But there is a provision in the law, and one which will become widely used, where a person can bankrupt themselves. Well, the process is very simple. It involves making an application to the High Court in what's called a bankruptcy petition, and that involves you swearing to the court in a sworn form called an affidavit that your debts exceed your assets by at least €20,000. And you also have to establish that you've tried one of the other insolvency arrangements which hasn't worked. In those circumstances, you're entitled as of right to be made a bankrupt. That has to be advertised in a national newspaper. It appears that the Insolvency Service of Ireland will accept a number of different newspapers by way of advertisement. The total costs are somewhere around €1,000 fixed costs, and then if you want lawyers to do it, obviously there'll be an extra cost on top of that. What we find, or what's found in Britain, however, is the process is so simple that people often apply themselves. They don't need any lawyers to do it for them. Well, on the moment of the adjudication, all your assets and all your debts are moved away from you and they're vested in this figure called the official assignee. That's very important to realise, that from the very moment of adjudication you have no more debts. No more borrowing from Bill to pay Paul, no more sleepless nights worrying about paying debts. It's all over. You don't owe anybody anything anymore. That's all the past, and you're now involved in a process which will leave you debt-free. You will meet with the official assignee, or one of his representatives, who goes through your assets and your liabilities and your income. And I want to just deal with each of them in turn. Let's say you have a job. Any excess income that you have from that job would vest or would be taken by the assignee in what's called a bankruptcy payment order. So say, for example, somebody's on 60 or 70,000 euros a year. Might seem like a lot, but when everything is taken into consideration, what we find is there's very little excess income available. But if there is excess income available, the assignee will take that, will pay his own fees first, and if there is anything beyond that, he distributes that among the creditors. So that's the first thing in terms of income. The second thing is in terms of assets. If you have any assets, those assets have now vested in the official assignee. The most important and substantial asset most people have is their home, and I'm going to deal with that separately. But if there are other assets like paintings or whatever, they do vest in the assignee, and the question is, will he take them and sell them? In reality, he doesn't take or touch the normal things of life. But if you've got some special asset worth something, that asset will be taken and sold. I have to say that depends, but I'm going to deal with a number of possible scenarios. First of all, if your home is in negative equity, it's transferred to the assignee, but there's no interest in it of any value. So if the assignee was to sell the house, he doesn't get anything out of it, because if it's in negative equity, all the proceeds will go to the bank. Similarly, if you co-own a house, say for example in a situation of a husband and wife, only your part of the property transfers to the assignee, and say for example your wife hasn't gone bankrupt, then her part of the house remains vested in her. And the assignee has said publicly that he's not interested in taking family homes, and in cases of negative equity, he's very happy to sell your interest to your wife for a fee of 5,000 euro. I don't know where he came up with that figure of 5,000 euro, but that's the figure, and presumably that could be paid over time. So imagine Mr. and Mrs. Mr. decides to go bankrupt. His part or interest in the house has now transferred across to the official assignee. But the house is mired in negative equity. Imagine the house is worth 300,000 euro, but the debt, the mortgage, is 500,000 euro. So there's no benefit to the assignee in this because the thing is in negative equity. So he will sell, the assignee will sell to Mr's former interest for a fee of 5,000 euro, which can be paid over time. And now the house is out of bankruptcy or out of the bankrupt's estate. And then it's about negotiation. It's about going to the bank and seeing if a negotiated deal can be done in which a reduced or restructured mortgage is put in place so that the family can continue to live in the house. The interesting thing about bankruptcy is that in many ways your family house is actually more protected in bankruptcy than without bankruptcy. And the other thing is this: imagine the worst case scenario. Imagine the house is repossessed. Well, the negative equity is gone because you're in bankruptcy and all unsecured debt is being written off. So in that situation, you're actually in a much stronger position in your negotiation with the bank, because you can say to them, Mr. Bank, I owe you 500,000 euro. I have a property worth 300,000 euro. If I give you the property back, that's it. You can't pursue me for the balance because it's all been written off in the bankruptcy. However, all my other debts have been written off as well, and I'm continuing to work and I'm continuing to move on with my life. So I may well be able to afford a mortgage of 300,000 or even a bit more. And that's in your interest, bank, and it'll be in my interest. So put simply, you can't be sure of holding your home in bankruptcy, but our view is you're in a stronger position in bankruptcy than otherwise, and in any event, if the house is repossessed, you're debt-free. The answer is, of course, you can work during your bankruptcy. You don't have to, but of course you can. And for most people, the jobs they have are unaffected by bankruptcy. There are some positions which are restricted to bankruptcy, such as company directors, members of Dáil Éireann and so forth. But for most people, bankruptcy doesn't make any difference. I would always advise somebody who's considering the option, they would check with their employer that it's not going to affect their employment. The reality is that in days gone by, bankruptcy was often associated with people who had behaved maybe badly. But the situation Irish people face today is not of their own doing. This is events completely outside our control. So for most people, their work is unaffected. But as I say, that income then goes into the pot, and if there is excess income, the assignee will take that. Some people also ask about pensions. How's my pension affected in bankruptcy? And it's very simple. If you're entitled to take income from the pension during the 3 years of bankruptcy, or if you're entitled to take a capital sum from your pension during the period of bankruptcy, that goes into the pot. But if the pension is locked away, if you're younger, then it's unaffected by the bankruptcy. Well, it lasts in Ireland, as of now, a maximum of 3 years. You must be discharged after 3 years. However, if during the bankruptcy the creditors agree, you can be discharged at any time during that period. But importantly, you're discharged on the 3rd anniversary, and I really want to get across the sense that whilst you're discharged after 3 years, during the 3 years, life goes on. Well, you're discharged from bankruptcy and you're debt-free and life moves on. The European Commission have recently said that everybody should be given an opportunity for a fresh start. And that's what bankruptcy is. It's an opportunity given to you for a fresh start. And that's very important for you, but it's also very important for Ireland, because until you're debt-free, or at least your debt is restructured to manageable proportions, Ireland's not going to recover. So helping you recover is helping your country recover.